Hello again. This is Gary Arzt on the Tobacco Road for CigarChannel.com. And I have the pleasure of being here today with William C. Paley. Tell us a little bit about Samuel Paley.
Well, Samuel Paley, my grandfather, immigrated to the United States in the 1880s. And he came from a town called Brovary in the Ukraine. Once he arrived, the family soon learned that they had to make a little bit more money than they had. So he went to work as a young man in a cigar factory, working first as a lector who would sit up on a high stool and read to the cigar rollers the news of the day or novels like The Count of Monte Cristo and interesting adventures. He progressed through the various jobs of the company, and in his 20s opened up his own cigar store and company, and he called it Congress Cigar and made his first cigar, which is called La Palina, which means Paley.
Which I have right here.
And this is the 21st century La Palina. It bears a picture of my grandmother Goldie, who was
his wife, who
was on the original label for the cigar back in 1896 when it was first produced. Now, I had dabbled with this a little bit because I have a home in the Bahamas, and I wanted to make a cigar to give to my guests.
In the very truest sense, you wanted a house blend.
Exactly, a house blend.
Just for your humidor there and let them smoke a Lightborn.
Exactly, and it was going to be back called a Lightborn cigar. But the more I thought about it, the synchronicity of going back to the La Palina cigar was inescapable. And the more I investigated the idea of making a cigar, the more overwhelmed I became, because this was a huge undertaking, and I knew so little. But I was very lucky, as I have been through this entire endeavor, and made the acquaintance of a man named Enrico Garzioli, who owns the Great Cliff Factory and Resort in the Bahamas. And I had recently tried one of his excellent cigars, the Chateau Grand Cru, and was very impressed. It had a flavor which really appealed to me. So I sat down with Enrico, and the product of his great blender and roller, Avelino Lara,
who was still alive at the time.
Oh yes.
To your good fortune.
To my good fortune, he was still alive, and his blends and his palate and taste for cigars had a lot to do with the development of this La Palina today. Well, I learned a lot in that time working with Enrico, and we tried many different blends, wrappers, until I found one which really satisfied my palate. Now, I'm no gourmet or great cigar expert, but I know what I liked.
You were very fortunate to meet Avelino Lara. Did you work personally with him?
Well, he gave me some guidance.
Yeah, all right.
And provided the grounding for this cigar, and his mixtures of Nicaraguan and Honduran tobaccos were particularly piquant to me, and carried a very Havana-esque smoothness and robustness. And I really appreciated that, and I was very lucky. And the first cigar I ever had was a Monte Cristo No. 2. And I was brought up exposed to the very finest things in life. My father was a great epicure.
And a great cigar smoker.
And a great cigar smoker, yeah, because he had grown up in the business as well. And in fact, the business of La Palina had a very interesting closing, in that in the 1920s, my father was then head of advertising for La Palina, got interested in this new medium called radio, and thought it might be an excellent carrier for the idea of the La Palina cigars. He went ahead and sponsored a small radio show in Philadelphia called the La Palina Hour, and spent maybe a couple $100 on it, which drove my grandfather nuts. Thought it was a total waste of money. But
what's this radio?
What is this radio? This toy? And but sales went up, and people started stopping Sam on the street saying, "I love your show, Sam. The La Palina Hour is great." Well, the more my father and the family learned about radio, the more excited they got. My father went out and bought 7 radio stations, which were called United Independent Broadcasters, and collecting them, along with the properties they owned, renamed it the Columbia Broadcasting System, and that was the birth of CBS.
The Tiffany Network.
My grandfather, seeing a good thing when he saw it, retired, got on the board of CBS, and left the cigar business behind.